Hello and welcome to another episode of ALFSU. Today, Hema Mohan will join us. She is the first one of a series of women in IT who I will talk to throughout the whole month of April. I'd like to welcome Emma to our show.
Thanks.
Welcome. You recently moved, or not so recently moved, to the United States, didn't you?
That's right, about 4 months ago.
Great. And where were you before?
I was based out of Bangalore, India.
Very good. Hema is an expert on change management, and some of the topics we will discuss today is how you detect collisions. When your change process is not as well defined as you think it is, things usually go wrong. Hema has seen this a lot of times, and we'll talk about that at length. But before we start, can you give our viewers a little overview about change management and collision detection specifically, without boring us to death?
Okay. So change management, as the name suggests, it's all about dealing with change. So, initially the definition of change was anything that required approval, but now the scope of change management has increased. It could vary anywhere from replacing a phone equipment all the way until provisioning a server. So change is done at different intensities in different organizations. Mm-hmm. And collision detection is, one of the differentiations that change brings to the table, where you're identifying where two or more changes are colliding. So collision is usually not a bad thing to happen, right? If I'm planning a change in an organization and there is already one more change being planned on that particular server, I can choose to club 2 or 3 changes and run it at one point instead of having multiple downtimes defined for different changes. So collision usually is identified as a negative thing, but in my opinion, collision is something that can be interpreted as positive as well as negative.
I like it. Now, I heard that you recently entered some design competition.
Oh, yeah.
Jeez. Tell us a little bit about that.
So there was this cubicle design competition at San Jose where they wanted us to design our cubicle based on the product or the project we work on. So since I work on the most interesting module in ITSM, I thought, why not explain to people about change management using Who Moved My Cheese as an analogy. So if you remember, Who Moved My Cheese was a book which talked about how our protagonist Hem dealt with change. So I basically called Hem as Alan Albrook, who's our favorite demo user in ITSM, and talked about his, how he typically deals with different types of changes, which represented cheese in the, in the change world, and the traps that Alan had to face, like no standard change and no standard process in place. He's not able to, define the impact or the risk, no risk mitigation plan in place. So finally, how his problems were solved, and the conclusion was that you basically have to do collision detection, impact analysis, have a standard process in place, use a change calendar to schedule and monitor your changes, and finally accept that change is inevitable.
It is. When you're out there talking to customers, you hear about these horror stories where a bad change process has caused something. I have personally, always worried about it, that some of the vendors, for example, that I use, doing some of the things that are going on out there. What are some of the nasty stories you've heard?
There are different, scales or intensities of nastiness that happens to customers. But one which I had seen some time back was, the organization worked towards coming up with a marketing plan, and they had planned, they'd sent out all the, flyers saying this is when we're going to have a sale. It was a retail customer, and they had everything ready, but they hadn't, brought the IT team on board, or they hadn't prepared them for it. And a change was planned on the app server for the same day. So imagine the amount of dollars that were spent for the marketing campaign, and they say, log in on such and such a day to avail your offers, and that's the day the server was brought down because a change was being implemented. That meant 2 things. One, there was a clear disconnect between business and IT. The second was that, that's when a change calendar comes into play. You can see the business events that are being planned, so that IT gets the perspective. Usually the blame comes on IT. People say he screwed up, she screwed up, but then the point was IT was totally oblivious to what was happening, right? So a business event is what is shown on the calendar. So that usually explains what you can plan or not plan around that time. And the second was that, it could have been preponed. IT only meant to help, right? They were trying to improve the performance of the system by bringing in more resources, so they could have preponed it and helped make it a more successful campaign. But in the end, it turned out to be a blame game, who blames whom, and it was a total washout.
Are customers starting to get the point when you're out there talking to them? Do they start to take change management more seriously?
Absolutely. And in fact, we learn a lot from some of our very mature customers. The kind of the way they use our change module is very interesting, and we in turn get to learn a lot about change from them.
Yeah. Being a woman in a very man-dominated industry, having worked both here and on a different continent, what are some of the challenges you run into when you try to consult with customers and try to make them understand how you can improve the ITSM structure they have?
So I haven't seen too many of these in my new role as a product manager, but then 2 years ago I used to be a pre-sales consultant, so I have seen a lot of I have been a part of funny instances where customers used to look behind me to see if I have brought a senior person, or if I've brought a senior manager with me, because some people even thought I was a kid walking in. So you at least in my case, people didn't take me too seriously, because one, I was a woman, and second, I was a petite looking woman. So those issues, yeah, I don't think men get to deal with. And this second part is also the time taken for a woman to we usually take the technical route. We have but socializing is not that easy for us. Men usually go out for a cigarette, they usually go out for a drink, and then even though they met for the first time, they say, hi, hello, I'm so and so, and then they hit it off. But then for a woman, it takes longer to get into the social circle, and try to understand the customer, and get into a larger conversation with them to understand where they come from. That's usually a challenge.
Well, and that's an interesting topic that, for example, Sheryl Sandberg over at Facebook has addressed recently in her new book, that women to some degree need to band together, and they need to put their better foot forward and take a more proactive role in making themselves available in the whole company. Do you agree with that type of strategy?
Absolutely. I in fact read a lot about lean in, and both positives as well as negatives. Some people say, if I lean in anymore, I'm going to fall. So that's one way some people look at it. The others say, maybe the right amount of leaning in is required for us also. Maybe we tend to hold back. Maybe we tend to go through the all the syndromes she's defined in her book, where self-doubt is one of the most prevalent ones. So it's interesting, because she's supposed to have started this whole trend of creating awareness, and some organizations like Intel and Facebook have recommended that the senior management reads it and become more aware of it.
Well, I think it's important that strong women like yourself do lean in and create a better future for all of us. It's really nice to have you here, and I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your life with us in a candid manner. For next week, Sharon Sims will come into the zoo, and she'll talk about discovery. Until then, take care.
Thank you.